Good afternoon. It's Monday. I'm Sal Greco, and you're listening to the Sal Greco Show. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button. If you're watching us on Rumble, hit the Rumble button, hit the like button, hit the follow button. If you're listening on any major podcast streaming platforms, please like, share, and subscribe. Today, I'm going to cover a few topics with one of my brethren in the finest unfiltered family, Marlon Bethel. He will come on. We'll be discussing these two detectives that have a whole lawsuit now against the New York City Police Department, and there's a backstory to that. There's Harry Siegel, who was one of the journalists that was targeted by John Schell, the chief of department of the NYPD, and the deputy commissioner of operations of the NYPD, Kaz Daughtry, online. There was other things that have occurred. And the final part here is I'm going to give you a preview to this. Here's a story here. Handcuffed and punched, NYPD officers face legal action after fracturing Bronx man's jaw in brutal false arrest. Beating an innocent man based on feelings merits criminal investigation. This is not what the NYPD is. Hashtag the Sal Greco Show. Hashtag the finest unfiltered. So we'll be covering that and all the other subjects that I discussed. And let's get this show going right now. Two NYPD detectives faced brutal retaliation and fake rats while probing corrupt bosses. Lawsuit. This is by Tina Moore of the New York Post. Two NYPD detectives allege in a bombshell lawsuit filed Saturday that they have become modern-day Serpicos, investigating police corruption at the highest levels, only to be retaliated against by their own department and even mocked with images of rats at their desk. Detective William Seidman, 42, and his partner, Detective Anthony Vidot, 57, were assigned to the city's Department of Investigation in 2020 to root out corruption and bribery involving NYPD and city officials, their lawsuit at Manhattan Supreme Court claims. One investigation involved allegations that clubs in Midtown and Queens were paying cops and their associates for special treatment, like not issuing no fines for noise complaints and ignoring other violations, sources have said. Seaman and Vidot in 2022 were asked to run numbers in lists given to them by the DOI. They weren't told where the numbers were from. We had the case in its infancy, Seaman told the Post in an exclusive interview. One of the first names that popped up for us was James Caban. James Caban was the twin brother of then Police Commissioner Edward Caban. Soon after, other big names surfaced, including mayoral advisor Timothy Pearson and then Deputy Mayor of Public Safety Philip Banks. The lawsuit claims the two gumshoes went to higher-ups at DOI with their shocking discoveries. When this comes out, you're going to have worlds collapsing, Seaman told his then DOI boss, Audrey Feldman. It's going to take the police department down. The detectives kept the DOI case close to the vest, but frequently felt their NYPD bosses were fishing for information to get ahead of the probe that was about to ensnare top NYPD brass and Mayor Adams's closest advisors, they alleged in court papers. It became clear that Sergeant Vincent Danes, their direct NYPD supervisor at DOI, was trying to get information report back to their commander, then Deputy Inspector Raymond Festino. Festino is one of 5 NYPD bosses named in the lawsuit and was in charge of a dozen detectives, including Seaman and Vidot at DOI, the suit alleges. That's when it switched, Seaman recalled. They want us off this case. That's also when the intimidation tactics began in earnest. The gumshoes would show up to work at DOI's Maiden Lane offices in Lower Manhattan and find photos of rats hung near their desk with their confidential license plate numbers written next to the rodent picture, the suit alleges. Send rats packing, the sanitation advisory message declared. Around this time, the U.S. Attorney's Office joined the mushrooming corruption case, and the detectives were warned by DOI to not share information with other cops since DOI is not sure who was compromised, they claimed in the lawsuit. Meanwhile, abuse from their own bosses began to fester. In September 2022, the two partners attended a line-of-duty funeral at the request of a squad commander. Festino was allegedly outraged that they had skipped a going-away party for a civilian team member. He phoned Vidal, a U.S. Marine who was shot in the line of duty as a cop in 2003, to berate him, the suit claims. You think you could do whatever you want? You mother effers, Faustino's allegedly shouted. I will effing kill you. I will kick your effing ass. Faustino had an ugly history of hateful remarks, the detectives claim. Once, while Seidman, who is Jewish, was helping to decorate the office Christmas tree, Faustino walked in the room and allegedly said, "Look at the Jew doing the Christmas tree." The detectives filed an internal equal employment opportunity complaint claiming discrimination in a hostile work environment, the suit alleged. As the corruption case expanded, Faustino became more controlling, allegedly telling them that whatever work they did moving forward would be for him and only him, they claim. The detectives were also told that they had to check in every 2 hours while they were in the field and needed special permission to work overtime, costing them thousands, the suit claims. The detectives were worried and shared their fears with one of the DOI investigators. I'm telling you right now, the retaliation is going to be through the roof, Seaman said he told DOI. When this comes out, I'm done, and I called it. In 2023, both detectives were taken off the corruption case and transferred to other units, first to the real-time crime center at police headquarters, and then the city's Office of Emergency Management in Brooklyn. The new assignment stuck Seidman, who has 4 kids with a 2-hour commute, the NYPD retaliation tactic known as highway therapy. Vidal decided to retire and now drives a school bus part-time. It's been rough, Vidal said. I feel bad that I left and Will's still there, but I couldn't take it anymore. The way they were coming after me, I said I better leave while I can. Seidman, a 17-year veteran of the force, has been languishing at a city shelter in the East Village as an OEM security officer and was recently told he is being transferred to the subways. Attorney John Scola, who filed a lawsuit, said the department needs true independent oversight to root out corruption. Hardworking detectives like Seidman and Vidal, who stood against their corrupt superiors, have seen their careers destroyed in retaliation, proof that without real reform, justice within the department is an illusion, Scola said. There have been no criminal charges in the case the pair was investigating, but Philip Banks and Pearson both resigned amid the federal investigation. The probe is one of many swirling around Mayor Adams' troubled administration, which saw multiple raids, subpoenas, and resignation this year and last. The City Department of Education was served with a subpoena as part of a federal probe into outgoing school chancellor David Banks and his brother Terrence Banks, a consultant who represented companies that scored lucrative contracts with the city, a source told the Post. Both are brothers of Philip Banks. Adams was named in a 5-count criminal indictment in September 2024, alleging he took bribes from Turkish interests in exchange for official favors. He has pled not guilty and maintained his innocence, pushing hard against claims this week that he was set to step down. So here to discuss what I just read out and posted and showed you on the Sal Greco show with these 2 detectives and plenty of other things, Marlon Bethel, who's part of the Finest Unfiltered family. So Marlon, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sal. It's always a pleasure to come on here and go through these latest the latest happenings in the NYPD. It's never a dull moment in the city, apparently.
It isn't. And I know there's a lot always, I hear a lot of chatter. The argument against us always is you guys have an axe to grind, but still amongst this axe to grind, nobody has debunked anything that we were saying. So I want to just point to that. But speaking of these 2 detectives, as we just read this article that they're suing and they're part of the Department of Investigation, I had posted something that should have gone viral because it is true. And it's not because I'm saying it. It's because I have this from a very good source, authority, or we'll say somewhere where you will eventually see this in some kind of litigation or an indictment. That's the closest thing as I could say publicly. So that was the headline. 2 NYPD detectives face brutal retaliation and fake rats while probing corrupt boss's lawsuit. And this is what I had posted. Former NYPD Chief of Department Jeffrey Maddrey and NYPD Police Commissioner Ed Caban are intricately connected to this mishegas of a caper. Allegedly, Maddrey obtained information directly from these detectives in a closed-door meeting. After they left the meeting, Maddrey then met with Police Commissioner Caban in his office, and they allegedly reported the findings back to the mayor and his cronies. Detective Vidot was going to retire when Chief Madry allegedly convinced him to withdraw his retirement when suddenly NYPD opened up an investigation against him and his partner. They failed to sue the main parties, Caban, Iglesias, which was Miguel Iglesias, the former chief of internal affairs, and Madry. The retaliation was designed to derail the investigation into the Caban and the other cronies' related activities, Consofrito and more. The retaliation circle appears to be former NYPD Police Commissioner Eddie Caban, former NYPD Chief of Internal Affairs Miguel Iglesias, and former NYPD Chief of Department Jeffrey Madry, while keeping the mayor's office informed of it all. No wonder the DOJ intervened, yet now President Donald Trump's DOJ seems to allegedly want to dismiss Eric Adams' serious cases that was always very much so more than just airline ticket upgrades and far and widespread. Hashtag the more you know. Hashtag the Sal Greco show. Hashtag the finest unfiltered. Marlon, I'm sure you have a lot to say on that. What are your thoughts?
Oh yeah. You know, we've been talking about this for the longest while, and one of the things I've said personally is that all of this is connected. And if you go through this complaint, you see several names that keep popping up, names that we've long mentioned, you know, and if you've been following along, you can see how those connect to the recent controversies and scandals that have plagued the NYPD. I mean, you have some of the names mentioned here, right? You have OEO, which was led by Wendy Garcia. You know, she's on her way out due to her inaction related to the overtime abuses and the scandals that have come out of Jeffrey Madry's office. You have the DEA. You have names like Paul DiGiacomo and Brian McGuire, which I know personally and who did nothing for me as the job was trying to fire me for the illegal mandate. Then you have other members who are mentioned who go back to the fraternal organizations. You have Ray Jenkins, you have Madry, you have members of the Hispanic Society that are tied into this. And we already know that there's rumors right now that the fraternal organizations are themselves embroiled in a pay for promotion scandal that's just bubbling under the surface and waiting to be revealed. You also have Group 1 mentioned in here, and as you know, Group 1 failed to take action when Eric and John of the Finest Unfiltered made complaints against members of Chell and Madry's crews that were harassing them and threatening them online. So you see, as we said in the beginning, this all ties together, and as Sal has mentioned many times before, it all goes back to Consofrito, because it's like Consofrito was like the meeting ground where all these unsavory personalities like came together and partied and possibly even planned what they were going to do. But you see, if you've been following along, when you read this, alarm bells keep going off in your head, because they sure did mine. You know, when I see these names keep repeatedly coming up and the same names that we've mentioned before. So there's a lot to go through here. And as we've talked about offline, we might even have to do an extended show, because there's just so much to dig into here, and there's so much dots to connect.
Yeah, we actually did a roundup on Friday, the previous Friday, on the Finest Unfiltered in the morning. And we're probably going to do that every Friday, kind of like a roundtable. But the thing is the news, it's so much, and it's every few hours, it's something new that's trickling out. And the names that Marlon's mentioning, like Wendy Garcia, who I also reported and told everyone she was out, and she is out. They just can't replace her position. They don't know who to put there, because the person that wanted to take it and was supposed to take it from sanitation is still, in limbo with that, because they don't know where Jessica Tisch stands in this, because she's the police commissioner, but as we pointed out, police commissioner in name only. So she doesn't know if she's staying or going herself, Jessica Tisch. She says she is, but she's not allowed to terminate anyone like John Schell and Kaz Dodry or Tanya Kinsella or Tariq Shepard. So she's what? She's a placeholder. And essentially, she basically bought that seat, in all honesty. So that ties back into this whole part. And what we're talking about, yes, if you've watched this show and John and Eric's Final Unfiltered, we've always talked about con sofrito. And that is, again, in the middle of it all, because, again, that's where everything happened. We, and just the unsavory characters that were connected to that. And nothing was ever done we don't know if anything's done. There's an investigation, but yet nobody's being perp walked. There's no indictments yet. And it was so blatant in your face. So blatant in your face. All the stuff done in camera that we already have certain things. Like, remember, there was a report to the human trafficking unit, right? In the NYPD. So that means that they believe there's human trafficking coming out of Con Sofrito, and then that went nowhere. And this is something these detectives would have been able to look at and know about. But if you pull them off and start calling them rats, it gets wiped under the table. So that's why these are things that we knew, but yet everyone says you have an axe to grind, listen to John Schell, since the guy, we all know, he didn't even have a grand jury for his shooting. And that is that will become something that they all jump to very soon. But these are the people that are in the media that listen to this kind of guy. And then we go back to John and Eric. I want to get to the next topic, which is Harry Siegel wrote this brilliant article because he was also the target of their vitriol. Harry Siegel was picked on, and he's the senior editor of the city.nyc. He also writes a column once a week in the New York Daily News, but he's been around for a while. And whether you like him or not, he likes to hold public servants and elected officials accountable, whether they're Republican or Democrat. But for some reason, John Schell and Kaz Daughtry came out against him, like vitriol online. So I'm going to read what he posted himself. This article came out, I think it came out on NBC. So this is an MSNBC. The NYPD smeared me on social media. A new report proves me right. We are the police and you are a gadfly, one deputy commissioner posted on his official account. And this is by Harry Siegel. Policing done right is hard, honorable work, and maintaining confidence in the police as a fair-minded, apolitical institution that enforces the law in an impartial way is all about staying calm when emotions are high. That was the bottom line of last week's 41-page report by New York City's admirable independent department of investigation, which last year tore into an unprecedented torrent of antagonistic tweets by top NYPD brass targeting elected officials, judges, and even the occasional journalists. The report found the barrage irresponsible, unprofessional, and intimidating. The DOI even questioned whether some posts violated the federal Hatch Act, barring political activity by public officials. The NYPD leaders who spent the first few months of 2024 publicly attacking their perceived enemies online piped down as the department weathered raid after raid after raid by the FBI. The department churned through 3 commissioners, while Mayor Eric Adams, an ex-cop now facing a criminal trial on corruption charges, cheered on his police officials as they lashed out. Chief John Schell, who's since been promoted to become the department's top uniformed official, challenged a woman who'd asked tough questions to Mayor Adams to come find him at the funeral of a murdered police officer. He attacked a judge for the release of a violent criminal on bail, but named the wrong judge, and repeatedly called on voters to cast out a socialist city council member as the two exchanged crude insults. I was the subject of some of the attacks, labeled in a tweet on the official @NYPD News account as Harry Deceitful Siegel, and smeared by various bosses there for hating cops as they vowed to no longer allow disingenuous and outright false reporting to be spewed unabated. We are the police, and you are a gadfly, sneered a deputy commissioner on his official account. I welcome criticism and often learn from it. I always take pains to get the facts right and correct them when I don't. As for remarks like these, I defer to DOI Commissioner Jocelyn Schreiber, who dryly stated no aspect of the social media exchanges that DOI reviewed in this investigation served the public. Adams thought differently. I don't think they attacked anyone, he said last April. If a columnist has a right to an opinion, he added, a police officer has a right to an opinion. As if the chiefs and commissioners talking trash from their official city accounts were ordinary officers doing so while walking a beat. There's a big problem if police with shields, cuffs, guns, and the authority to use them and their bosses are as free to mouth off as the people armed only with pens and keyboards. There are just 3 institutions remaining in America that most people have confidence in, according to Gallup: the military, small businesses, and the police, which just barely clear 50%. Newspapers are at just 18%, another reason why Adams may not want to equate his police chiefs with ink-stained wretches. Each time a top cop replaces just the facts, ma'am, courtesy, professional, and respect with smack talk, it eats away at what remains of that hard-earned public confidence. It would be nice to think that the mayor once knew better. The NYPD is good at laying traps, executing traps, and even if the trap doesn't capture the prey, they will shoot the prey away. Adams said years ago, laughing while reminiscing about his own 2 decades wearing a uniform. The police department doesn't have rules. They are the rules, the mayor said. New NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch, who Adams brought on in November to clean up the mess that he'd made of the department he once served, has been moving with force and speed to restore the NYPD's chain of command and public confidence in its works. But the 2 leading ex-trolls, who the city's own Department of Investigation just called to account, are still there, just keeping quiet for now. To spell out the embarrassingly obvious, what's at stake in America's biggest city is the very idea of a fair-minded police department that's above politics, maintaining the trust needed to protect and serve the public. It's a sign of how much cleaning up remains to be done by Tisch and how much resistance Adams may pose to that work, that this has to be stated. What are your thoughts of hearing that from Harry Siegel? And it does cover that DOI report, which also would factor into any future litigation by John Macari or Eric Dim.
You know, as I just said before, to the previous case of Seidman and Vida, the 2 detectives in formerly of DOI, this is all related, right? There's something important that we need to think about here. These incidents keep coming up one after the other. There's something underlining all these issues, right? It's a worldview and a mentality that these people have, you know? In my response, so John put up a tweet yesterday, related to a, cronyism, and about merit in the NYPD. And I responded to someone who commented that, yeah, well, I'll just briefly mention that. I commented about it. I responded to someone who basically blew it off and said that basically this was happening all the time, right? And what I said to that person was basically that the people who got in charge of the department now had this mentality that corruption has always existed. This is part of the way things work. And now it's our turn to eat, right? And this is an important worldview that we need to think about. Because when John Chell was responding to when he was getting into his Twitter tirades against Harry Siegel and we know he was directing a lot of those comments to John, Eric, and Sal, right? The thinking behind it goes back to that it's our turn now, and they have a sense of arrogant entitlement, right? And that's all the hubris that's come out of all their actions is related to that. Okay. They think that it's like a prince who now gets to the throne, and now they believe it's their time to run things however they like, regardless of the rules. The rules don't matter here. Okay. It doesn't matter that John Chell gets on Twitter tirades that are against department policy and that are questionably against federal policy. Okay. It doesn't matter because they're in charge now and it's their show to run. And you're seeing it. You're seeing it in this incident. You're seeing it in the last incident I mentioned. It's the rules apply to you. They don't apply to them because they're above it now. And this is something we got to keep in mind. And in a lot of ways, it's even more dangerous than the incidents themselves, because what this does is it's going to create a systematic corruption. And we can put out these little flames, but there's going to be more. As long as these people are there, that mentality is going to persist. The more they get away with these things, the more that mentality is going to persist, and the bigger the incidents are going to become. And as you're seeing as time goes on, we went from hearing about cronyism to then hearing about overtime abuse. Now we're hearing about retaliation. Then we heard about Caban's extortion racket. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and wider and wider, and it's all because of the way these guys think.
I not only agree with you wholeheartedly, but it just keeps going back to it's like a run around. You run in a circle, but it always goes back to the same middle point, which would be Eric Adams and his cronies, and how they're running the police department. It should scare people because they're wasting taxpayer dollars and they have a lot of authority, which they're abusing. And quite frankly, they are committing criminal acts on the side with their rackets and other, criminal elements that they're involved in. So you have a crime syndicate running not only New York City, but the police department. It's very apparent. It's very apparent. But the problem is, I still read in that article, Harry has a lot of hope in Jessica Tisch. Jessica Tisch, as we know, is just the police commissioner name only. She's a billionaire puppet. She bought that seat. And as we actually covered on the Finest Unfiltered on Friday, the state of the NYPD, there's a lot of rhetoric. It's a lot of we're going back to the past, right, with her. But in actuality, she's pointing a finger from using her bully pit. Oh, the politicians. Her family donates to all those politicians. So she is part of the problem in herself. Yeah. So she can point the fingers. Yeah. You got to, in the end, say, well, your family funded Eric Adams, right? And all these other politicians.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm going to play exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
That's right. Here it is. This is what John had said. He says, merit-based after less than 4 years on the job with 62 total arrests, and according to NYPD Online, only 3 months in the squad. Retired NYPD Chief Rodney Harrison's daughter was promoted to detective. Eric Adams remains a swamp of nepotism, incompetence, and corruption. And I would like to add cronyism. So let's play the video of her, promoting her.
I want all of you to know that all of today's promotions are what we call merit-based promotions. And this is what everyone in the department can expect to see at each and every promotion ceremony going forward. You are here today for one reason and one reason only. You earned it. But as I'm sure you know, you didn't do it alone. Behind every good cop and every good leader is a family who supports them through all the ups and downs of the job. Many of them are here to witness this ceremony and share in your success. So let's give all of them a round of applause for all the sacrifices.
All the sacrifices, Marlon. I see the left side there, which have been to her right, but the left side of that video, there's a bunch of people up front that don't belong there. Shell, listen, this chief of detectives, Kenny, he's in a major lawsuit with a lieutenant named Ramirez where he was involved in another cover-up with these detectives that were drinking out at that zoo, whatever electric zoo thing, but they were trying to pin it on the lieutenant. That's what Kenny was up to, okay? This is while he was in the detective bureau. Then we have Rivera, Chief Rivera, who's Jimmy Rodriguez, remember the mob associate, self-admitted criminal from Con Sofrito, where anything and everything that happened in one of his places there, he's pictured specifically smiling with him multiple times, hanging out with him. That's Philip Rivera associating with someone reasonably believed to have engaged in criminal activity. Then there's even more behind them, more people that associated with Jimmy Rodriguez and company. So that whole speech sounds like it's just a play on your emotions, Marlon. We said this before. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah. How many of those people would not have a career if they weren't part of that big club? John Chell alone would not have gotten to those ranks had he not had Magri in his corner. It's the rules apply to you, but they don't apply to them. You guys who are out there busting your tail on these cases, trying to get grade or trying to even work your way to becoming a detective. You're busting your tail, and then you have people like Harrison's daughter. I mean, she could be a good cop. 62 collars is decent. It's not outstanding, okay? But the point is though that everyone should be given their turn to work their way. You shouldn't be given like a rocket fuel advancement because your last name is the same as the chief or the guy who used to be the chief. You know, it's a big club, and again, the rules only apply to the youth. They don't apply to them. You know, that when she said that alone, those people on the left side of her should have been squirming in their seats because, you know, none of them even belong there. You know, had it not been for their association with the in club at one people.
There's definitely a club there, and it might even go back to Conso Frito. That was another club. They all hung out together. But then we have also another topic here, which was something else that was covered in the New York Post, actually, and it actually quoted John McCarry. I'm impressed. I'm really impressed because, you know, they usually don't like to cover anything or give John or Eric or myself or you any kind of credit for anything. It's kind of like, we're the black sheep. This was the headline. NYPD union sounds alarm on new facial recognition tool that would be weaponized by anti-cop activists. And John is quoted in there in this article. They actually used what John was saying about AI and all this other stuff in the 58. Retired NYPD Lieutenant John McCarry, who sounded the alarm on X over the new photo search option, warned cop haters will likely abuse the newfound ease for obtaining NYPD officers' personal information via photo. And you could read the whole article, but there's been a lot of discussion with the 58. I know Eric and John, they're not in favor of it. I got to be honest, I like 58 because the New York City Police Department, they like to hide information. They like to, like, I don't know, like they don't want to tell you certain things. And for some people that need to have legitimate lawsuits, or if you've ever been in litigation, the city and the NYPD love to they go to the court and say, we don't have to give you anything. And some of the only things and only ways you could find anything out is through 50A, actually, through they have to produce disciplinary matters if they've been on a list, an adverse list, which we'll get to in a little bit with someone else. These are very important things that 50A does. Obviously, the photo recognition, though, I don't know about that. What are your thoughts with that, Marlon?
Yeah, well, I've joked in the past that the 50A, they need to do a better job of my picture on there. In fact, one of these days, Sal, I'm going to come on here with a suit too, just so they can get a picture of me. You know, the truth is I didn't like the 50A in the beginning. I really didn't, you know, but I've come to realize that in the age we live in, with a dishonest police department, the 50A is necessary. You know, if we had a police department that actually was honest and did its job, and we had like the unions to push back against the job, we had all these people who have roles meant to guard against a rogue police department. If they all did their jobs, then we wouldn't need the 58. But since none of them are doing their job, and since all of them seem to be part of the club too, then the 58 becomes a necessity. But with that said, right, if you go to the Finest Unfiltered Twitter site, John put up a short a couple days ago, right? And the short actually was yesterday. The short gave a point about the 58, which I never thought of before, right? The only issue I have, and this goes back again to the police department and the unions doing their job, right? They need to set boundaries, right? So the 58 is okay. I have no problem with it. But the fact that cop haters could use the 50A and then go on the street or go to a cop's house and harass them is another story, you know? And again, it begins with the unions, the job, the DAs, even the mayor, everybody doing their job properly and setting boundaries, you know? It's okay to put up a cop's info there. Okay, fine, whatever, right? It's not okay to then use that information to go to the cop's house, to go to be breathing down his neck on the street as he's trying to do his job. It's not okay. There has to be boundaries set so people know where not to cross the line. And if those who cross the line and use that information to then go after cops and harass them, there should be punishments for them. But like I agree 100% with you. In a dishonest world, we need the 58. There just has to be boundaries set by government and all the members the government administrators and people in power who represent local law enforcement to set boundaries for people who use that information, so that if they use it adversely, there will be legal consequences for them.
Very well said. And just because you pointed it out, I just found it. I'm going to play the clip of what you're talking about. There it is. This is the underlying issue with 58, utilizing facial recognition to identify NYPD officers. So let's put this up. Let me blow this up for everyone. There we go.
But I find it really funny that cops are very mad. Cops that support facial rec. Oh, what do you care, bro? You don't do nothing wrong. I don't do nothing wrong. Okay. What do you care, bro? What do you care, bro? And I got the same argument here. So it's either good or it's not. And like, that's the thing I see here. I don't like the way 50A is utilized. I think that it's important and transparent that officers, that there is accountability and we're able to get records that you're needed. Should you sue an officer? Should you make a complaint against an officer? Should you want to see how a case or an allegation goes against an officer? Or if you were a victim of something, I think it's important that there's transparency. But the 50A in particular is being used to, at a moment's notice, harass and annoy police officers. So to me, I don't really even see an issue with the facial recognition portion of it. I just have a bigger issue with the fact that the NYPD to date has not put a memorandum out, has not taught officers what harassment of a law enforcement officer is, and when they should utilize that law and how to effectively arrest people and when people break that law, in conjunction with the district attorney's offices to set boundaries. Listen, you could read my disciplinary record, but you could do it from 5, 6, 7 feet away from me. If you start to approach me in an aggressive manner, now you are being disorderly. You're harassing me. You're performing OGA, and you will be arrested for it. And I think that's the bigger issue. So everyone's pissed about it. I'm like, I see it a little bit different way.
So there you have it. I mean, that was a good take by John. I see what you're saying. I agree. I also, look, like I said, I like the 58. I don't like that, you're going to be 2 feet away from an officer screaming about, and I've seen those videos. I think that's insane. Some of these people are insane for what you're doing with filming people. I know in other jurisdictions, like down here in South Florida, you're not doing that. You will be on the ground. You might be tasting the pavement, and because you're in an area where you shouldn't be. Now, if you want to be 10 feet away or 5 feet away, you got to be at least 21. I think it's 21 feet we were always taught in the NYPD. That's okay. But I know what John's saying. They're in the face with the camera. Officer, you did XYZ. Come on, man. You got to grow up. Like, I don't know what that's all about, Marlon. I know, but I've seen it before.
Yeah. If I could add one more thing, right? So I'm sure there's going to be like an entire army of sycophant cops who work for these chiefs and the 1PP cronyism class who hate that we agree that the 58 should be there. But I'm sending you a message right now. If you don't think that a 58 should exist, then why aren't you pushing for more transparency in the department? And why aren't you pushing for an honest department so that we wouldn't need this? You're the same class of Nepo babies at 1PP who benefit from the cronyism now, while complaining about the 58. You can't have it both ways. We got to have transparency. If we have transparency, there's no need for the 58. Okay. If we had an honest department, we had honest one police plaza doing their job, we had honest unions, there'd be no need for it. So you either push for that honesty and transparency, or, you remain quiet, because that 58 needs to be there as long as we're not, as long as we don't have an honest department.
I always say the Reagan motto is always trust but verify, but I actually say the opposite: verify then trust. That's for the back the blue crowd. And listen, we're all for the rank and file in the police departments across America. That's the average Joe or the average Jane that walks into work and goes out in the street, but then they'll be disciplined for having white socks on when should wear, all this kind of nonsense. Meanwhile, it's this upper class, and I believe Eric Dim breaks it down to the three classes, that goes on in every police department. It's this upper class that is the issue. They have a problem with 58 because they don't want you to see their own corruption. Because to get to the top, all the way to the top, usually they're doing something. There's something there that's happened, or they don't want, it's something hidden behind a closed door. So 50A will hold people that are in those positions accountable. And if you have nothing to hide, you're right. What are you worried about? I mean, I'm up there. You're up there. There's nothing you could do. It's up there forever, memorialized. Too bad that, for the haters, there's nothing in those files for myself or you. So, or John McCarr. I know they love to harp on Eric Dim, but again, nothing happened to Eric Dim. And a lot of that stuff came in a small period, which had to do with all the BLM riots that occurred. So, again, it's, and some of that was politically created. Those are politically created events and crimes that occurred. Because the day-to-day operations as a police officer, you shouldn't have any, you want to be ending up on 58 and having all these lawsuits. How many cops retire and a lot of them don't have anything or maybe something minuscule? That's what it's designed to try to hold some kind of transparency because there is none in this police department. That's what we've noticed. And I'm about to read you an article and show this on the screen over a disgusting incident that has occurred. And this is going to get bigger and bigger, folks. This is like for me, this sounds like the modern day version of a Rodney King from LA in the early 90s to something today, because this is 2025. This isn't 1991. All right. So let me read this to you. And there's going to be a lot of evidence in this article. It was more like a press release. It was also in the New York Post, but they don't cover it the way it should be covered. Once again, I'm not going to pull any punches. This is Eric Sanders, who's my attorney, happens to also be Lieutenant Epps' attorney, and now he's representing this gentleman. Handcuffed and punched, NYPD officers face legal action after fracturing Bronx man's jaw and brutal false arrest. For immediate release. Civil rights violations highlight ongoing pattern of police brutality and discrimination in New York City. February 1st, 2025, the Sanders firm has filed a formal legal complaint against the New York City Police Department on behalf of Jalen Ryan, a 21-year-old Bronx resident who was falsely arrested, physically assaulted, and subjected to racial profiling by NYPD officers on December 28, 2024. The legal claim filed with the New York City Comptroller's Office seeks compensatory punitive damages for false arrest, excessive force, racial discrimination, failure to intervene, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The incident, which unfolded in the early morning hours in the Bronx, underscores ongoing civil rights violations by the NYPD, adding to the growing list of cases involving racialized police brutality and unconstitutional policing practices. Incident overview. NYPD officers allegedly assault and falsely arrest innocent man. At approximately 12:25 a.m. on December 28, 2024, Mr. Ryan stood lawfully next to his mother's 2017 Mercedes-Benz GLS SUV near 187th Street, near 187 East 188th Street in the Bronx, ensuring that a female friend, Caroline Martinez, entered her apartment safely. The area is known for high crime rates, and Mr. Ryan was exercising reasonable caution. Without provocation or reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, a group of uniformed NYPD officers led by Sergeant Brian B. Mahone, shield number 4797, tax registry number 9555166, aggressively approached Mr. Ryan and demanded identification. Before this incident, Mr. Ryan had never been arrested and had no criminal record, making the officer's actions even more egregious and unjustified. When Mr. Ryan inquired why he was being stopped, the situation quickly escalated into an unjustified use of force. According to the legal claim, multiple officers grabbed Mr. Ryan, threw him violently against his vehicle, and forcibly handcuffed him without explanation while Mr. Ryan was already restrained. Police officer Joel K. Ayala, shield number 4081, tax registry number 954509, delivered a closed fist punch to the right side of Mr. Ryan's face, causing significant pain and trauma. Mr. Ryan was transported in Sergeant Mahone's vehicle to the 46th precinct, where officers fabricated a disorderly conduct charge. During transport, Mahone allegedly taunted Mr. Ryan, stating, "This is what happens if you do not give the police what they ask for. You'll get punched in the face." Explicit racial profiling and retaliatory ticketing. Upon arrival at the 46th precinct, Mr. Ryan repeatedly requested medical assistance, complaining of pain and dizziness from the punch. Officers delayed treatment and actively discouraged emergency medical technicians, EMTs, from evaluating him properly, further exasperating the harm. When Mr. Ryan's mother, Nazima Royster, arrived at the precinct, she confronted Sergeant Mahone about her son's injuries. Mahone allegedly responded, "When you do not follow protocol, this is what happens. You get punched in your face." In a stunning admission of racial bias, Mahone further justified the officer's actions by stating, "He's a black kid driving a Mercedes-Benz and the windows are all tinted. Vehicles like that, police, search for drugs and guns." After spending several hours in police custody, Mr. Ryan was released with 3 summonses, including disorderly conduct, issued without probable cause; double parking violation, issued after the arrest; parking near a fire hydrant, issued after the arrest. These tickets issued after the incident appear to be retaliatory and an attempt to justify an otherwise unlawful arrest. On January 16, 2025, upon review by a Bronx criminal court judge, the disorderly conduct charge was immediately dismissed. And it's right here on the screen. And notice here in the story here, it says, at TPO, defendant refused lawful order to provide driver's license. Defendant stated he had a license but was not going to present it to officers. That is a very sad story to put in there. That's the Ryan summons. The dismissal is right here. There's a record of it right here from the court. They dismissed this immediately. So that's a whole nother story with this. So this article continues. Pattern of NYPD misconduct and similar cases of civil rights violations. The NYPD has a long documented history of excessive force, racial profiling, unconstitutional policing, particularly in communities of color. Mr. Ryan's case is not an isolated incident, but rather part of a systemic problem that has resulted in wrongful deaths, excessive force incidents, and legal settlements costing taxpayers millions of dollars. Notable similar cases include Eric Garner, 2014, died after NYPD officer Daniel Pantaleo placed him in a prohibited chokehold while arresting him for allegedly selling loose cigarettes. His final words, "I can't breathe," became a national rallying cry against police brutality. Delron Small, 2016, shot and killed by an off-duty NYPD officer during a road rage incident. Video of evidence contradicted the officer's self-defense claims, yet no conviction followed. Kowalski Treywick, 2019, shot and killed inside his apartment after NYPD officers entered without cause, escalating a non-threatening situation to a fatal counter. Dauna Zayar, hope they didn't mess that name up, knocked to the ground by an NYPD officer during the George Floyd protest, resulting in severe head trauma. Legal violations in Mr. Ryan's case. The legal claim against the NYPD alleges multiple constitutional and civil rights violations, including false arrest, no probable cause existed for Mr. Ryan's detention, excessive force, the use of violent physical assault against a restrained individual, violates NYPD policy in the Fourth Amendment, racial discrimination. Sergeant Mahone's explicit racial statements prove biased. It is bias-based policing and violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Fair to intervene. Multiple officers witnessed the incident and failed to prevent or report misconduct, making them equally liable. Negligence and medical misconduct. The denial and delay of medical attention violate NYPD protocol and fundamental human rights. 6, retaliation and fabricated charges. Issuing unjustified tickets after the arrest constitutes abuse of authority and attempt to cover up misconduct. Call for action and systemic reform. This is from Eric Sanders. This case exemplifies the deeply entrenched systematic failures within the NYPD, where excessive force, racial profiling, and unlawful detentions persist without consequence. Mr. Ryan was unlawfully assaulted, humiliated, and deprived of his constitutional rights for no reason other than being a young black man in his own community. This legal action is not just about seeking justice for Mr. Ryan, but about holding law enforcement accountable and demanding real systemic change. The officers involved in this egregious misconduct must face the full weight of the law. Their actions warrant immediate termination, suspension, and criminal prosecution. We call upon the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York and the Bronx County District Attorney's Office to conduct a thorough investigation and bring criminal charges against these officers to ensure that no individual is above the law, including these entrusted to uphold it. Marlon, I want to get your thoughts on that before I pull up the 2 individuals' 50A. Remember, we were going to discuss the 50A. Well, we're going to show you their 50A. So, Marlon, what do you think about reading all of that and seeing that?
Yeah. I was saying there's a lot of issues that underline this incident, right? The first thing is tunnel vision. John talks, now I was never a supervisor, right? But I can tell you from the other side as a cop who's gotten tunnel vision before in incidents that this is why you need a good boss next to you who should kind of separate himself from what you're doing. Let you be the cop and he be the boss. The reason I say this is because as a cop, you know, especially as an active cop, you get in this mind frame when it's on, it's like hard to turn off until that guy's in cuffs. You know what I mean? So you need a boss who's there, who's going to be ready to pull you out of your tunnel vision if you're going too far, right? John always says that you need a boss to protect you from yourself. And this is where that comes in. By protecting you from yourself, meaning he's there to pull you out of your tunnel vision if you get to a point where you might be crossing, you might be ready to cross that line, you know? The other issue here, and I made a tweet about it, right? I said yesterday that looking at the bigger picture, right? Incidents like this are usually the byproduct of command level pressure cascading from 1PP down to the precincts and down to the specific units. And the pressure is to beat your prior numbers or to exceed them. Oh, well, to exceed them or at least match them, right? Now, this pressure is often faced by a lot of active and high performance, like violence suppression units, you know? If you're at FIO, there's constant pressure to beat your last year's search warrant number, you know? If you're in one of these gun units, there's constant pressure to get more guns than last year. You know, same thing for narco. Everybody has pressure and that pressure comes on down and floats to you. And one of the problems is that in a case like this, you have pressure coming from the top and that young man has pressure coming from the media and the progressive media and its associates, which include some of these wacky politicians we have in the New York City and New York State and other progressive states, right? That pressure is to assume to be confrontational with every police encounter, right? And that needlessly escalates the situation. And that often escalates into the situation going sideways, right? And now there might be things missing that we don't know yet, but we know for a fact that a summons was involved and that the plaintiff was injured here, right? So my question was also in that tweet, why, if you have to punch somebody in the face, they're going through. Otherwise, why did you punch them in the face? Why did you use force at that level, right? If they're not in cuffs, right? So there's a lot of issues playing here. And, you know, one more thing. In the prior segment, we talked about how the different roles in law enforcement, the different people at the top have to do their job. Well, in this case, that problem trickles down to the bottom too, on the street. And supervisors, you got to do your job too. You know, you got to do your job, which is to protect the cops from themselves, pull them out of situation and to prevent that situation. Your main job, right, is to prevent that situation from going sideways, right? And now I think this is hard sometimes for a lot of cops who are active cops and now they become supervisors because in their heads, they still want to get out there and they still want to be, you know, the guy that slaps his cuffs on a perp. But the problem is you're the boss now and you're going to still have a chance to do that. But your priority should be to make sure your guys don't get lost in that, you know, as they're trying to slap cuffs on the perp, you know, so to be ready to like, whoa, you know, step back. Let's, you know, put some other guy to deal with the perp or you talk to the perp. But basically you have to protect cops from themselves sometimes, like John said. So that's what I'm thinking happened here. And like I said, I'm sure more is going to come out. But we talked that we talk about how everything is related here, right? And you dig through this and you can see how the threads eventually merge with this and create it creates a stew that leads to bad incidents, you know. And unless we stop this, more incidents like this are going to come because that pressure is coming from multiple places and it collides. And the results are incidents that go sideways, and it's no good for everybody. It's not good for us, not good for the communities. That's what I'm thinking about this one now.
So I'm thinking about the quality of life, Chief, that's coming out now. That's going to put a ton of pressure on the So actually, I want to go back before I put the 58 up for you to see. First of all, if you detain somebody, you do strike them in the face. That's going to be that field force report. We don't know if that was done. An ambulance must be called for somebody who's got punched in the face. I believe he broke his jaw. And you don't issue summonses after the arrest and another summons that you issued. So at this point, right here, you already have, and the supervisor on the desk that allowed all of this is another issue. So again, the desk officer's on the hook. This sergeant's definitely on the hook more than anyone else. And the cop and whoever else was there that should have intervened, because you don't issue a summons for this. You can't take someone to the precinct and issue. Those days are over. I don't know if you actually read the patrol guide. You can't do that. So what was done here is you're already lost. You're behind the 8 ball. But then the continuation of, well, you're in the cell. So what we're going to do is you're under arrest, but you're not under arrest because we're just going to give you a summons and then after a fact, give you a couple other summonses. That stuff doesn't fly anymore. That may have been like 20 years ago, maybe in our day when we first started, but that stuff stopped. So when you make an arrest, those things you're saying he did have to be charges on an online booking sheet. Also, there should have been what's that when they make the arrest and then they void it? A voided arrest.
Yes.
Because you issued a summons instead of putting them through the system. And I'm almost positive that wasn't done here because we know how precincts operate. So there's a ton of protocols that were not taken here. And this is a huge miscarriage of justice. And I would love to see this body camera and exactly what was being said, not only between the sergeant and the officer, but what was said between the sergeant and the defendant and also the others, the police officer and the defendant and them with each other. What was said there, because this stinks. But now I'm going to show you the 58. We'll go one by one because there's only 2 of them. Joel K. Ayala, we see here. Now it says now he's a sergeant and then in the 46th precinct. He's a sergeant there. Look at his record. Substantiate allegations. He had a discipline case. We won't know. Even if you click on it, it won't. His name in a lawsuit. Okay. So it's a lawsuit. Command discipline. Look at this lawsuit settlement. Look at that. Look at that list. And then there's the complaints. Now, this usually doesn't judge someone when, look, 18 complaints, 58 allegations, 18 substantiated. So that's this Joel Ayala. Now we're going to go to the Brian Mahone, who instigated the whole thing. He was the first officer of contact, we'll say. And here's Brian Mahone there. He also it says how much he made, too. See substantial allegations, but here's what I really want, and got a lot of discipline cases. The main thing right here, credibility. Brian Mahone appears on the adverse credibility list of officers with potential credibility problems. And then, of course, there's a slew of lawsuit settlements, could be good or bad, depends how you look at it with someone. He's also in a few articles, but here's the main one here. Complaints. 12 complaints, 40 allegations, 13 substantiated. And, Marlon, you see this disciplinary record, you see the actions. What are your thoughts on seeing that?
Well, first of all, that shows you what role the importance of the 58. Because you'll never find out about that adverse credibility list had it not been for the 58. We would never have known that John Schell is actually on that list too. But you'd never know without 58. But a lot of active cops have, good or bad, have a lot of lawsuits. So we know that's a fact. But this is this shows you why it's important for the sergeant to save cops from themselves. You know your guy's a hard charger, good or bad. You got to be on your P's and Q's. Got to make sure this guy doesn't cross the line. You got to tell him like, dude, step back, let give it some time, step back, let save him from that tunnel vision that he might have. He might be a go-getter and a hard charger, and which is good, but you got to know when to pull back and save him from himself, before he crosses that line, right? But this is it goes back to what we said. We need people to do their jobs. If everyone in the department does their job, then we get to a better, more efficient, more transparent, more honest department, right? But there's just so many questions that we have for this incident that it's like, how did it even get that far? Yeah. Now, another thing about that adverse credibility list, right? That was one of the reasons why I made my tweet, because I know a couple guys who are on that list, and some of them are great cops. These guys could sniff a gun out just by walking outside a precinct, right? But what ends up happening is there is so much pressure from above that they're quick to react sometimes too quick, sometimes when they should be hanging back and just observing a little bit more, because they're so good at it sometimes that it pushes their instinct to react a lot faster than they should. And a lot of times that pressure to meet or exceed your past numbers pushes them to be overly aggressive. And I believe that has a part to play in it, right? That right now, we know the Bronx has been on fire right now, right? And the administration is getting a lot of pressure and a lot of pushback as to why this keeps happening. We know that the issue extends beyond just the cops doing their work, because the DAs aren't doing their job and the city isn't pushing the DAs to do their job as well. But one of the problems that happens, like I said, is that pressure goes down to the cops on the street, and it pushes them to be overly aggressive too fast when they should hang back a little bit. Let's observe a little bit. Let's don't react so quickly, is what I'm saying, So this is what I'm thinking of this incident, and I'm sure it's going to become a bigger deal as we get closer to proceedings and as the body cam comes out and all that. But I think it's not going to be a good look, and these incidents don't help with our perception in the community. It just makes the job harder for the next guy who's just trying to do his job and trying to get the next gun off the street. This is something that the job needs to honestly look at itself and I get the pressure to beat your numbers, and a lot of this comes from ourselves too. Because when I was in the FIO's office, I felt it too. We got to get this gun. Last month we got 3. We got to get this. We got to hit this door. But you got to realize some point. There comes a point where it's like, slow down. Let's not, just because we want to do this job, let's not get ourselves in trouble, because the tide is against us, unfortunately. The tide is against us, and they're waiting on us to make one mistake to throw us in jail. When you're an active cop, especially in these heavy units, you're one incident away from going to jail. So you'd better be on your P's and Q's, and you better, take a measured response to a lot of these things.
When it came to this incident, it seems that there was no accountability from any supervisor here. That seems to be a glaring fact, and there's definitely missteps in the protocols. There's also no reasonable call. What is the suspicion? What is the reasonable suspicion of any of this? What the guy was standing there, and then the summons is issued after everything here was done wrongfully. That's the best way for me to describe it. Short of you saying, "Hi, how are you, sir?" None of this makes sense. I look forward to, hearing more details about this. This already sounds disgusting, and I know Eric Sanders doesn't take cases if they aren't legit. It's got to be something legit with evidence, and what you saw already was bad enough. I don't know what to say. I think other than there'll be more to come, and we'll be covering that on the Finest Unfiltered and the Sal Greco show in regards to this incident. But this is what we mean. We back all the rank and file in the police department, but this is the problem, is when there's one or two bad apples, you need to root them out, because this can definitely poison the entire well of the tree. And if it was some chief that comes down with directives, that needs to come out too, because you know what? We're tired of hearing the double talk where, oh, it's got to be nice community policing, and then meanwhile, you might have a chief, John Shell or otherwise, at state, nah, we got to go and brutalize people, because that's what I did in my day 35 years ago. That's what you're going to do today, because I bear no responsibility. I'm sitting on One Police Plaza hanging out with Dr. Phil and whoever else it is that they hang around with. So, Marlon's been a riveting hour. Like you said, we could go on for 3, and I'm sure we'll have more in the future. So, where can people find you, and what's next for Marlon Bethel?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Sal. You guys can find me on, I'm on Twitter, or X, as Fire Detective. I'm on there on Instagram as well, under the same name. Just watch the Finest Unfiltered and watch Sal's show. You know, you're going to find me every now and then. I'm going to pop up on either one. And as Sal mentioned, we're trying to do a weekly roundtable on the Finest Unfiltered. So you watch either, and I'll be there. And I'll let you guys know of my next moves, but stay tuned and be aware of what's going on. And those of you guys in the department, right? You just remember the chiefs and the guys pushing you to be a cowboy aren't going to face that same scrutiny when you mess up. Okay, they're in their protected tower in Manhattan while you're on the street. So again, take a measured response to what's going on and be aware of what's going on. Just always think to yourself, that you can't try to remain out of that tunnel vision, okay? And protect yourself. All right. Thanks for having me, Sal.
Thank you, Marlon. This has been another great edition of Sal Greco Show. Tune in on Wednesday. We'll have a fresh episode, and God knows what happens from here to Wednesday, because this is an ever-changing cycle. And like I always state, New York City was the shiny city on the hill for America. So as New York City goes, so does the country. This has been Sal Greco. You're watching the Sal Greco Show, and I'll see you on Wednesday. And until then, I bid adieu and goodbye.